Well, I think it goes even deeper than that, Al, and I think you're on the right path. And this is like a level 2, level 3 discussion. So we're kind of jumping way ahead in the game, which I love to do. And I was looking forward to do with you because I'm not that interested in the kind of ABC stuff. So in that book, and I don't need to pump the book, just if people like anything, just come listen to the shows. They're all for free. You don't have to buy the book. You can get almost all the book online for free. It's not that, but I'll tell you, the first chapter in the book is this interview that I had with parapsychology researcher Dr. Dean Radin, who is top of the notch guy, who's basically proven over and over and over again, scientifically, with replicated studies that have been replicated not only in his lab, but in other labs, that this scientific materialism doesn't hold because effects like telepathy and ESP and precognition are real and can be demonstrated in the lab. So that's a given. So the interview that I'm referring to, though, is an interview I had with a guy who is one of these pseudo-skeptics, but you can't really say he's a pseudo-skeptic. He is scientific mainstream. Dr. Steve Novella is a neurologist at Yale University School of Medicine. I mean, this is top notch in the U.S. It's the elite. So to call him a skeptic is to really miss the point. This is science being done the way that science is done. And Novella's interviewing this guy named Ray Hyman, Dr. Ray Hyman from the University of Oregon. Stick with me for this story. The payoff is worth it here.
Sure.
So Hyman is slamming Dean Radin in the most just unprofessional way. You know, he's laughing at him. He's saying he's a weird guy.
All the childish tactics, right?
Yeah. And then he's making all these specific claims about his research. He never replicates his work and this and that, which is totally false, provably false. And I interviewed Dean Radin, and Dean Radin's just he's a nice guy in addition to being a brilliant scientist. And he just, one after another, just knocks down Hyman's points. Who is Ray Hyman? Oh, turns out CIA hired him to do, statistical analysis on this. Oh, turns out when the Stargate psychic spy program, if anyone isn't familiar with it, the U.S. had a program where they developed this technology. It's just psychic stuff. It's remote viewing. A psychic sits there and tries to project his consciousness into that other realm and see what the Russians are doing on the other side of the world. They were tremendously successful at this. They ran the program for 20 years. All these people have come out in the program and said it was successful here. It had these unbelievable results. We had hits and misses, but overall it was tremendously successful. Hyman is hired by the CIA to write a hit piece to bury that research and say there's nothing there. Now, any just logical person stands back and goes, well, wait a minute. They funded it for 20 years. They had to go through all those cycles. They had all these different agencies involved, CIA, NSA, Naval Intelligence, Army Intelligence, all these people. And now it's been declassified and people have written all these books.
Yeah.
And this guy wrote a book saying none of it ever happened. And now here he is popping up again because Dean Radin proves this stuff in the lab. And who pops up again? Isn't it strange that this clown from University of Oregon is called out of the woodwork again? Come on, give us a little spiel on why this is all bullshit. It's not like a mastermind thing. I don't believe there's like this master puppet controlling thing. No. It's just somebody has a Rolodex, and when they want a certain thing kind of pushed a certain way, they go through the Rolodex and they go, this guy's pretty reliable. Push him out there and he'll probably say the right thing. And invariably he does. And I think that's how the game is played.
Well, yeah. Actually, now that you said CIA, of course, that's a buzzword. So now the machines have picked up this conversation. Hopefully they learn something. But no, they actually launched the derogatory term meant to shut down an intelligent and system critical dissident debate. The word conspiracy theory.
Yes.
That's proven, and I mean, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's, Google it, people. The evidence is out there, and they admit it. It's open. So they invented that word back in the day after the JFK affair, when he was killed, in order to try to shut down critical debate, and it's worked very well for their agenda. And I'm not saying all the gurus in the pseudo-skeptical new atheist milieu are, hired shills. Some of them are just plain stupid.
Right.
Some of them have a lot of issues, I'm sure. Some of them are sincere. But when this movement...
Well, let me just interject, because what I've discovered and what I've come to believe is that, you don't need a shill. There's like you just said.
Well, you need a few, I think, to
I don't even think you need any, because there's such diversity of opinion out there. You can find people who are the mouthpiece for what you're saying. And it's kind of a harsh word, but it's really true. The old Stalin, useful idiot. So Stalin's saying useful idiot. Here are all these Americans who are protesting for communism, and saying that. He said, hey, there you go. Feed the beast over there. They'll just keep saying it. I think there's a lot of professors out there and a lot of people in academia where all you have to do is say, hey, that's our guy. He doesn't even know he's our guy. Just keep him saying what he's saying.
Oh, right. And so they just fund them instead. They find them and they fund them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it's not like they take a guy and say, hey, you have to think all these things that you don't agree with just to be a gatekeeper. No, I agree. They fund where they want society to go. That's the kind of social engineering thing, right?
Right.
So, but it's so interesting. I mean, I can understand that they fund everything that the multinational corporations, the globalist agenda, that is obvious. But they also do it on stuff where you wouldn't think it could be a threat to the powers that be. Why is the powers that be so afraid of, let's say, near-death experience, which you've been delving very hands-on into? There is a larger agenda here that is ideological, if not philosophical.
Oh, totally.
And, any thoughts?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. If you look at, and we could do all conspiracy, and it'd be fun to do it. So I'm gonna kind of go there.
I think we'll dance around with different things, but we're here now, so let's get dirty on our hands.
Yeah, let's get dirty. So if you remember the James Randi thing, which if people don't remember, he was really the epitome, the focal point for this skeptical kind of over the top, debunking everything kind of thing. His background is extremely, extremely interested and fits this conspiratorial profile. And I have to digress for a minute and tell these stories because they're not told very often. Mm-hmm. But look, folks, again, like Al said a minute ago, go Google this. So James Randi is a closeted gay man. I don't have any problem with that. And he's an older guy. So you think back about the days when he was probably coming of age, it was not a time to come out and say, I'm gay, because it was not accepted. Look in the history of what happened to this guy. He is caught by the police doing sexual phone calls with this group in, I'm pretty sure it's in the state of upstate New York where he's living at the time, and the police get involved, and Randy is let off because he said he was helping the police try and catch these dirty boys who were making these prank phone calls. Now, does that sound...
and they accepted it just like that?
Yeah, but so the real story then is, I think, and no one's really put this piece together, so James Randi goes on and seems to have this agenda that's closely tied to this other agenda we're talking about, which is to kind of crush mysticism, crush extended consciousness wherever it pops up with these super aggressive tactics. Well, if you connect that with what we know about how people's sexual habits or just sexual preferences or attitudes or behavior can be used to get them to do things that, blackmail or just encourage, I don't think it takes
classical intel strategy.
Exactly. Classical intel strategy. I can't make that connection. I don't say I have the evidence to make that connection. But that first part of that story, if you dig for it, and they tried to scratch it from the internet, but you'll find it. And anyone who looks at that says, hey, that's bullshit. That can't possibly be how that came down. And so the way it relates back to kind of an less conspiratorial kind of thing is Randi is known for having said when he first formed the Center for Scientific, or psy-op, or what was the name of it? It was the Skeptic Society. I forget the acronym, because then they changed it to CSI, whatever. But they came to him, his people came to him and said, hey, on this one, it doesn't look like we have the goods on these guys. So I don't know. We should probably admit that this form of astrology, the way we measured the Mars influence, it did statistically come out there. He goes, no, we cannot. We can't let the mystics win. We can't let this other side win. So
yeah, because in the 90s, there was a boost in New Age, people were very open, they explored, too much if you ask me, anything went, and there was a lot of quacks and stuff, but it seems that in the 2000, the pendulum has gone the other way to secularism, fundamentalism. So something happened there. But are you saying that this incident in Randy's life was very early on, before he became this debunking guru?
Yes.
Ah, interesting.
Very early in his career, when he was more, he was a magician, a stage magician was his main claim to fame. And it's just a little factoid. And so, but back to your point, which is really, really, I think, penetrating this issue. It's like, why would science care so much about near-death experience? When Eben Alex...
And why would CIA care about that?
Well, exactly. And I'll tell you, look, I want to get back...
Science ought to care about that.
And I want to get back to that point in a minute, because I think the Stargate remote viewing project has something to say there that is very interesting. But so near-death, you brought up the near-death experience thing. And again, if you take a step back and you say, okay, how is this really a science per se issue? It's really a medical issue, right? I mean, people are dying. They're being resuscitated. The researchers of near-death experience, if you look at their background, they're all medical guys, right? So Dr. Pim van Lommel in the Netherlands, he was a cardiologist forever, highly acclaimed. And you just read his account. He said, hey, early in my career, when you had a cardiac arrest, you died. That was it. Yeah. And then these resuscitation techniques started to get better and better, and we started to be able to bring people back. Well, lo and behold, I started to bring people back, and they were telling me, doctor, I don't want to come back. I was in this other place, and it was amazing. And he's a curious physician. He doesn't have any skin in the game. He's not a religious guy. He doesn't have any agenda. He's like, wow, that's amazing. I've never heard that story before. He hears it once. He hears it twice. He goes, I ought to investigate this. So he starts investigating these people that have these accounts, and that leads to all this. And then he says, hey, some of these people have been dead, quote unquote, and that's the medical clinical term for it, dead. Yeah. Some of these people have been dead for only a short period of time. But some of these people, and a lot of people won't know this, but if you have a cardiac arrest in a modern hospital, especially if it was 20 or 30 years ago, you're not resuscitated for 2, sometimes 3, 4 minutes. It's not like you see in the movies where you go flatline, there's already, there's immediately people pounding on your chest. It doesn't work that way. So he found that some of these people had been dead for 30 seconds. Some of these people had been dead for 4 or 5 minutes. Same experience, no different. Some of these people had been heavily sedated. Some of these people had anesthesia, which we should have no memory, no recollection. Same experience. Again, this does not fit the neurological model. But my point really in all that is this is basically a medical kind of question. So what happens though, like a couple of years ago when Harvard neurologist, Harvard brain surgeon, Eben Alexander has his own near-death experience and comes out with his New York Times best-selling book, he is slammed. He is attacked. I mean, it's just undeniable that
the wolf pack is at him. Yeah,
there was an organized effort. They attacked him on the most silly grounds. They said, "Oh, he's a Harvard neurosurgeon. He doesn't know anything about neuroscience. He should be when people say idiotic stuff like that, we're conditioned where a lot of people just nod their head and go, "Yeah, that's right." And then you do a reality check down. No, for God's sake, he's a brain surgeon. Of course he knows neurology. He doesn't become a Harvard brain surgeon without knowing neurology. It's a crazy, crazy claim. But yet, so it's all, I'll wind it all the way back to your point there. Why did they come at that so hard? Because it reached this level in the public awareness that they felt they had to put it down. There's no other way really to explain it, because otherwise it's just kind of a medical mystery, which we have a million of them.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure the people who want to crack down on this, those who fund that, they have an agenda which is not philosophical.
Right.
In fact, I'm pretty sure they are aware of this reality, which is kind of probably why they don't want us to go there. I mean, we can only speculate about their intentions, but it has no practical bearing as far as I can see. I mean, how can this be a threat to their political or their commercial agenda in the world? If people become...
Let me interject. Let me interject
Sure.
with another story. I can't answer that question, but it's the right question. It's the right question. Let's return to it, because it's like, how could this affect their political or economic agenda, right? So that's the question. We can't answer that, but a story I think is key to it. There's this guy out there. I mentioned the Stargate program.
Yeah.
So it was a program started 20, 30 years ago by Stanford Research Institute. And one of the guys I interviewed is this guy named his name is Joe McConnell. And he was, they say, psychic spy number one. Here's Joe's...
Oh, hang on. Is it this movie, Man Who Talks with Goats or something? Which supposedly was about these things? No? Something else. Okay.
Oh, it's related. Now, so, if we really get deep into it.
But it was portrayed like a comical, small thing in that movie. I know for a fact that it was much bigger and more serious than how Hollywood portrayed it. Yeah.
It was huge. So because they had the bigger picture is our intelligence organization got very, very interested in the mind. And what are the powers of the mind? What are the limits of the mind? Can we weaponize
LSD they launched? Yes.
Exactly. So you have all that MK Ultra stuff, and it all is exposed because it was done up in Canada, and they had a Real Freedom of Information Act, and all this stuff came out. Anyone can go look at that. They were doing anything they could, and to a certain extent, we understand that because we want intelligence to protect us, and to protect us, they have to go to some dark places. Well, they went to some really dark places. So the men at Stargate,
and they never came back.
Yeah, they never came. Yeah, they're still out there.
Yeah.
So the men that stare at goats guys were this group in Virginia, but it's all under the same program. It's all this mind stuff. How can we weaponize it? How can we control it? How can we prevent the Russians from mind controlling us? So the men that stare at goats were, how can we weaponize it? How can we get someone to psychokinetically stare at a goat and make his heart stop and make him die? And if we can do that, can we do that to a real soldier? And there's a realness to this. But then on the other coast of the United States in California, there's this group at Stanford Research Institute, and they're taking a different tact. And it's called Stargate, and it's doing this remote viewing stuff. Right. Can we spy on the enemy just by doing this particular protocol? It's psychic stuff. They don't call it
the Ingo Swann stuff, right?
Ingo Swann, right? Yeah. Who is a psychic, also is a Scientologist, by the way, very high-ranking Scientologist. But that was just further interested in mind stuff. So back to this story, one of the guys who comes and joins that program and becomes one of these psychic spies is a guy named Joe McConnell. Joe McConnell's history is this. He is in the army, and he's a real spy, feet on the ground spy on the east-west German border. And he goes into a restaurant and he's...
Hang on, when approximately was he operating? 70s, 80s?
I imagine it'd be the 70s. I'm just guessing.
That's very interesting. I'll let you continue, but I have to interject that then he was working directly under a Nazi boss called, oh my God, it slips me right now. It's my lack of sleep here. Because the Allies, a Nazi was actually running that agency.
I learned this from your show. And
exactly. But anyway, go on.
I knew about Project Paperclip, but
it's much bigger than that, man.
And the intelligence angle, but where you guys took it, which was just eye-opening to me, is the extent. His name starts with a G. I can't remember it either, but the extent to which they relied on these guys. So let's see. So he was in the Stargate project from 70 let's see, military career. I'm at his Wikipedia. We all love Wikipedia.
Reinhard Gehlen is his boss.
Yes. So this would have been in the early 70s, probably.
Yep. Gehlen died in 79. So not only was it his agency, but he was probably still chief in operation. But anyway, so tell us about this guy.
So this guy's on the east-west border in Germany. He goes into a restaurant. He comes out of the restaurant and he falls over and he's dead. He was probably poisoned. He was probably found out to be a spy and poisoned. That's what he later suspected. Even if you get food poisoning, you don't walk out of the restaurant and keel over and die.
Yeah, that's how they work. Yeah.
Yeah. He has the classic near-death experience where he's bounced outside of his body. He sees his body there. He sees him load him onto the ambulance. He sees the ambulance driving through the streets as fast as they can to get him to the hospital. He sees the whole thing. Classic near-death experience. Has the experience of then going to this other realm. As soon as he comes back from this near-death experience, he wakes up in the hospital, eyes pop open, and there are two intelligence officers right on top of him. Okay, what happened? What's going on? And he doesn't know what to do, so he tells them what happened. He said, I don't know how to explain this, but I had this, crazy thing, So they do all the briefing and all that stuff. He then goes on to his military career. In 1978, he's asked to show up in Stanford Research Institute to join this psychic spying program. And they open up, he sees them. This is an interview I had with him. You can go and listen to it. I'm not making any of this stuff up. They open up his top secret personnel file. So he sees his personnel file and it has this red label on it, says top secret. They rip it open and they pull out a copy of Raymond Moody's book. Raymond Moody is the first guy, the classic book that first started the near-death experience science thing. And they say, aha. And as Joe tells the story, this increased their interest in him as being a candidate for this remote viewing psychic stuff. And he turned out to be very good at it. So interesting little factoid. But play it back now into what we were talking about just a minute ago, Al. What it tells me is that in 1978, there was no pseudo-skepticism among military intelligence. They were like, heck yeah, there's some kind of connection here. This stuff works. There's something that's to this thing.
You mean at the lower level, or what you mean among people who work for them?
It's at some level, at a level that is really a decision-making level. So we don't know. We can't answer your question of whether or not that was part of their overall agenda. But I think there's a stark contrast between what science, institutional science, mainstream science has been kind of wrestling with. Oh my gosh, darn it, is any of this stuff real? No, psychics can't possibly be real. Everything is material, right? They're playing that game. Meanwhile, these guys are going, fuck yes, it's real. We know it's real. This guy had a near-death experience. These guys are doing remote viewing. We got to do everything we can to figure this out. But for them, what is off the table, it would seem to me, is the idea that this doesn't happen. That's off the table. They're not going down that path. They're trying to figure it out, trying to weaponize it, trying to perfect it, all those things. But as far as
they're not entertaining it philosophically, they know it's a real thing.
Exactly. And they're certainly not entertaining philosophically the idea of strict materialism. That's out the window. It's clearly out the window. Otherwise, you don't do this stuff.
Yeah, that's a useful idiot. They're goon. That's what they use. That's the gatekeepers' tactics, as I see it.
Right.